Okay, so I'd like to do a little illustration of mass producing syntax for R for dealing with banks of questions that have related items. Um, and anyways, what I'm going to do is use an example from a graduate student from the Rec Department, Stephen Foy's master's thesis research, and we're working together on getting his data analysis up and running, and he's in the process of doing a bunch of recodes, and anyways, I have a good example from that. So, um, one of the things you might have been wondering in this class on data analysis is what it is that a syntax file is supposed to look like for doing actual factual research. And what I'd like to do is show you just the start of that. Hopefully you can see with enough detail here, but on the right here we have syntax, which is I've deleted the kind of loading scripts for other locations so that this is just the syntax that I need to run. And you can see at the top here it has the remove all sort of statement, and then it has something that says to read the delimited file from a particular location, attach it, write a summary of it, and then to load a bunch of packages, although there's only one or two of these packages that are actually being used at this point. But regardless, they're there for in case we need them in the future. But if you see as we scroll down, there's quite a lot of stuff here. And what he's doing is he's going through and he's making the different types of variables that he's going to need. Um, and he's also creating objects like columns bound together that he can perform correlations on and see what's going on in terms of the relationship between a bunch of variables. And then right here at this level, what we've done is we've started to collect kind of a short list of helpful variables. So here's the dependent variables, which he's focused on first, and he's just starting to populate the list of independent variables. And actually there's more in here that will be added up here in a little bit. But what I want to do is to scroll down here, and you can see there's many different areas. And it's this item here, the emotional arousal recodes, that I wanted to look at. He went through and made one set of recodes of these variables, and we should look at kind of the source of what it is these variables are actually tapping into. So if we look at his survey, which is right here, this is the question that those items came from. And the question says, please rate the extent to which your guide made the trip. This is for guests on guided raft trips. Your guide made the trip spontaneous, and then they rate it between not nearly enough, not quite enough, just enough, a bit too much, and way too much. Challenging, stressful, thrilling, feel safe, boring, conservative, extraordinary experience, exciting, scary. Okay, so these items are kind of looking at two things at once, and this is why I ended up wanting to do an additional recode of this. Basically, it's measuring how spontaneous this person perceived their trip to be as due to the actions of the guide, and it's also measuring whether they thought it was just enough. Okay, and so that's kind of two different things. One is what it was like, and the other one is how the person assessed it. And so what I ended up wanting to do is to kind of divide those out as two separate variables. So if we go back here and look, oops, didn't mean to reload that. There goes a bunch of stuff. Those are all the different things that were run. All right, stop that, you. All right, anyways. So here are the items, and one thing to note about the items is 7 of them are, as the value increases, the arousal level of the person would have increased. And so if we look back actually at the items here in the survey, oops, here, we can see actually the feel safe, boring, and conservative were the 3 ones that were reverse coded. And all the other ones are going to be, the numbers getting get bigger as the value increases. So it's important to think about that, because if you were just to add these up, you would get a funny answer, because you'd think that something that was too challenging would not have been too boring. So anyways. Okay, so let's look at what I ended up doing there. Oh, where are we in the wrong place now? Oh, is this the wrong one? Yeah, sorry. There we go. So anyways, here we are. Pause this. Okay, so I ended up making two types of variables. One variable that's going to be a dummy variable actually for each of those items, and it's going to turn the indicator into a 1 if it was rated as just right, the 3 score, and it's going to otherwise make everything else a 0. And that's actually what this syntax right here is doing. The second item is simply going to report the score for each item, but it's going to flip the scores for the 3 reverse-coded items: the feel safe, the boring, and the conservative. And actually the syntax that does that is right here. Now the flipping one, there's only 3 rows there, so I actually just did that by hand. But the other ones, it's kind of repetitive, and you kind of have to type the same thing, but not quite, over and over, so that it's referring to each variable. And so what I did is in Excel, let's see, this one, I ended up making kind of a system for mass producing that. So what I did is I grabbed the names of the actual variables and I pasted them in here. And then I decided I was going to make a new variable that just added a 3 to the end of that to indicate that it was the variable that was focused on whether it was a 3 or not, right there. And then you need a little, caret sort of sign there that's that R wants to see. And then so I was going to recode. So the old value was going to become this new value there. And then that looks like this. And then you can see that the way I did that is by a series of ands, where you can take strings and take the first string and add another string to the end of it, another string to the end of it. And that's what, actually, so the first one just takes this and makes the name. And then the next one here puts the little caret in between. And so then you can see that this item right here, then I could use in my recodes, and I actually did. But then I also did the rest of the recode over here, where I have the word recode and then kind of how it worked. And you can see here that the end result, which is EL SPN1, SPN2, SPNT3 gets this recode, and it's just changing all the values 3s to 1s and everything else to 0s. And then the flipping one is over here, and you can kind of see the logic behind this. So we had basically a Likert scale sort of item with 5 different levels, 1 being the minimum and 5 being the maximum. And so if you think about that, if you want to change the 5s to 1s and the 1s to 5s and the 2s to 4s and leave the 3s the same, then you could do that with a recode where it's specifying all those values. But there's 2 problems with that. One is that he had missing values that he substituted means for, which maybe isn't ideal in this case, but probably won't affect us too much because there weren't that many of them. But the alternative, instead of doing a recode for specific values, just think about this mathematically. And so if we have a 1 as the value that someone reported, if we subtract 6 from that, it becomes a -5. And if we multiply that number by a -1, it becomes a 5, in which case we've turned the 1s into 5s. And the same logic works for 2s. If you have a 2, you subtract 5, you get a -4, you multiply it by -1, you get a 4, right? And the same thing works for all the values there. So that's what I did, is I just wrote a little script, a little formula for R, and all it says is that this flipped version of this variable gets the result of subtracting 6 from it and then multiplying it by -1, and that's what it did. So it flipped all those around. So anyways, this sort of strategy of using Excel to mass produce this syntax, then once you take this syntax, you can then paste it into, you can see it's right here. I pasted that in, and that's what I ran. And so then, let's see, and then, yep. And so then it kind of created all those, and we have new variables that reflect these recodes that the raw variables would maybe not do quite as good of a job of. Anyways, that's the end.